do a few things before we start. One is if you have a phone, make sure, as Catherine would say, that it's in worship mode. So if you can turn your phones off, that would be appreciated. Also, please be aware that because of recommendations from the Unitarian Universalist musicians and their network, we're requesting strongly that people refrain from singing in the sanctuary other than when the choir is here or when someone is presenting a song, leading a song. We do encourage you to hum. So evidently there's a big difference between the amount of air that comes out when you're humming and that when you sing. And because we want to protect each other, please refrain from singing during the songs. That's greatly appreciated. So I'm going to open the service by singing Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Words, of course, by Rumi, and from the 13th century. And please hum, if you will. Let me get my note first, okay? Because if you hum a different note, then I'm really going to be way off key. Okay. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. Our opening words are from the Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel, who was interim chair of the 2021 Unitarian Universalist Association Commission on Appraisal and was a co-author of the document they produced entitled Unlocking the Power of Covenant. Reverend Sissel says, a covenant is a mutual sacred promise between individuals or groups to stay in relationship, care about each other, and work together in good faith. In the UU tradition, we seek to raise the we above the I, the community above the individual. As seekers, we willingly choose to love each other and stay in relationship over and over, again and again. In this way, although we may break promises, by leaning into the transformational power of our faith, we can begin again in covenant to love.
We have these words from Laura Susan Ulrich for the Chalice Lighting. It starts with a spark. A quick flash that makes you doubt your senses, but then a tiny ember glows on the braided twine and brings a flame to life. Soon you find a candle sitting on a table, desolate with its wick, until its wick touches yours, and suddenly the brightness doubles. In an instant, the warmth has grown. This intensified glow draws others like a beacon. 5, 10, 50, hundreds, maybe. Not moths bent on self-destruction, but fellow travelers seeking the road ahead. The people begin to move forward. No matter how far the line stretches, no one is left to fend for themselves. Everyone makes progress, or no one does. In the distance, bands of other beacons now beckon. proof of other sparks that became blazes. The air crackles with anticipation as everyone approaches the center. There, the scales are balanced. There, the broken are healed. Now, you know what it means to be love. Now, you know how to illuminate the sky. Please join me in the affirmation of this church, followed by the doxology. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into covenant creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung. Through every land, by every tongue. De todos bajo el gran sol, sur esperanza de amor, verdad bella en la canción de cada tierra, cada voz. We've changed the order a little bit today, and so now it will be time for all ages.
Good morning, church. Kelly Ingram here with this morning's Time for All Ages. Today, I will be reading the story Between the Lines. I was just a boy when the colors were swept from our street. The sounds became quieter. Everyone was too busy to notice we were fading. Then, one night, the sky cracked wide open. Lightning crashed while wind thundered through narrow alleys. Rain poured down deep into the darkness. We stood in silence. When our sounds did return, they were different. Questions filled the spaces in between. Where had the color gone? Would it come back? Lines were drawn. Our street filled with an empty sadness. Days turned into weeks, and then a month, then a year. Nothing was fixed. Most people got used to it, forgetting that we had once been so full of color. Rust, red brick roads bathed in ripe orange mornings, lemon, popsicle yellow melting, sticky and sweet, freshly cut green against bluebird skies, and a sea of stars sprinkled on velvet purple nights. Every night, I dreamt about colors. When I awoke, I searched and searched in cracks and slivers, in gaps and rifts. But there was nothing left between the lines. Then one night, I didn't dream at all. I'd forgotten the colors. What if I never saw them again? There was only one thing left to do. We were finally working together when suddenly the rains returned, stronger than ever. The storm's fury lit the sky. A loud crash stole the lights, covering us in a blanket of night. Together we stood, quietly, huddled in darkness, eyes wide against windows wet. And then a whisper, a smile, a laugh burst from the dark. Once we started, we couldn't stop. The sounds of our street filled the room, just like before, when the color had been rich and full and everywhere. In the dawn light, we held steady. Together we had survived the storm. The sun peeked out, lighting the whole neighborhood. Voices, big and small, flooded the street in celebration. Laughter and love spilt out, filling the space between the lines. Thank you.
Good morning. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces. We welcome those of you who are joining us in our sanctuary and those who are joining via streaming technology. Our minister, Reverend Kalani Kachela, is not in the pulpit today. He is on military duty and will return to the pulpit next week. Sally Atkinson is a service leader, and I'm Maggie Locatelli, your service associate this morning. I am very happy to be with you today. Unitarian Universalism has no creed or dogma. We are a covenant-based church, meaning that we agree to live in relationship with one another according to the Unitarian Universalist principles and our church's covenant of right relations. We embrace diversity in all its forms. Everyone is welcome. You can learn more about our church at our website, uuchurchlc.org. If you are visiting us today, we'd like to meet you. Please rise in body or spirit and introduce yourself by telling us your name, where you are from, and how you heard about our church. Since we do not have a mic available in the sanctuary, just please use as loud a voice as possible. Sally will indicate when it's your turn. Do we have any visitors in the sanctuary?
Hi, my name is Zach. I was born and raised in Las Cruces. I'm here today because John Hamilton asked me to he wanted to come to the church and caregiver, so I brought him today.
John was a member here about a decade ago, if I'm correct. Okay. Welcome. 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 Okay. Anybody? And do we have any visitors through Zoom? Okay, I guess not from there. Thank you. And we are glad that you're all joining us today. If you feel comfortable, please fill out a visitor's card in the foyer. And if you were a shy visitor from Zoom, please leave your email in the chat so that we can invite all of you to future services and activities here. Directly following this service, there will be time to fellowship with one another during our coffee hour, hosted by the Hospitality Committee. They have drafted a new normal based on credible research and recommendations so that the time to meet and greet one another extends our focus on keeping us all healthy. For now, members of the Hospitality Committee will serve as refreshments, which we can enjoy outside. To help keep things simple, the Hospitality Committee requests that for now, we not bring our homemade goodies. One of the safe opening recommendations is to not share food from multiple households, as we have done in the past at coffee hours and potlucks. We are eager to reconnect and be in one another's presence again. Our eagerness may feel stymied or softened a bit as we adjust to multiple changes. It is important to keep in mind that the new normals we are adapting to are all in place to support our communal attempts to safeguard one another. And I have three important announcements today. First, the Tombaugh Gallery is reopening today. There is an exhibit being featuring the work of Dennis Lujan. Mr. Lujan creates colorful abstract art based on his eye floaters. He will also be showing found object sculptures with motors. The exhibit opens today right after this service. The gallery is open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 2. This exhibit runs through October 8th. As is true for all activities on our campus, masks and social distancing for this gallery exhibit are required. This announcement from Katie Fitzgerald, the chair for the auction committee. Join in the fun at the pancake breakfast and fall auction on Saturday, October 30th, from 9 to noon. Please note that the date for this event has been changed. Donations for events, services, baked goods, meals, and gift certificates are the essential components to make this auction work. There are only 2 weeks left until the September 30th deadline for donation forms to be turned in. So please turn in your completed forms to the lobby or library or via email. Thanks to all of you who have already submitted donation forms. We really appreciate your support. Auction events are fun and build congregational community relationships. You could host a themed dinner, a happy hour with tasty tapas, a fun brunch, or an entertaining game or movie night. Perhaps you could provide a service such as cooking and delivering a nice meal or offering a dessert a few times a year. Have a truck? You could haul off discarded items, pet sitting for someone on vacation, or having medical procedures could also be an option. When next you visit your preferred mechanic, hairdresser, or favorite restaurant, ask them to donate a gift certificate for us to auction off. All of those, including the gift certificates, would need to have a donation form. If you are a new member or would like to know more information about our auction, please contact Katie Fitzgerald. Her information is in the church directory. And this last announcement from David Rice, the Social Justice Committee Chair. Our church has joined 15 other organizations and individuals supporting the Tents to Rents campaign this fall. Please help reach our commitment of at least $1,000 in support of this campaign from Camp Hope and the Mesilla Valley Community of Hope. Where will the funds go? Camp Hope serves as a temporary living site for homeless individuals working toward their own home or apartment. It costs about $6,000 a year to move someone from a tent to their own permanent living situation. Camp Hope also assists in providing tents, cots, and misters. The temperatures can vary in the summer during the day from 130 in a tent to 105 at night. There are envelopes on the back of some of the chairs in the sanctuary. You can put a donation for this project there and put it in the basket today. You can also donate by visiting our church's website, the website of Mesilla Valley Community of Hope, or you can send in a check to the church office. Just make sure that you note Tents for Rents. Thank you for contributing to this important campaign to help some of the homeless men and women in Las Cruces move from a tent to an apartment. Thank you all for being with us today. Now I believe we're going to have the video from the UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray.
Hello, Unitarian Universalists. This is the season of ingathering, marking the start of a new congregation year. In recent months, as more people have been able to get vaccinated, many of us have been able to gather in ways that we haven't for a long time. It has been a joy to gather with distant loved ones, to hug our family and friends. And it's important to savor these gifts, these blessings. And we know that the pandemic is not over. Virus variants are creating uncertainty and greater risks for our children, the immunocompromised, and those who cannot get vaccinated. If you are eligible, please get vaccinated. This is the most important thing you can do to keep your loved ones, your communities, and one another safe. Getting vaccinated and continuing to wear masks remain a priority. And they help make our gatherings, whenever and whatever form they take, as safe and welcoming as possible for our children, for our elders, and for those most at risk. I share the feelings of frustration that we are not further along in combating this virus. And I know the heartache and confusion of trying to figure out how to best care for the spiritual nourishment of our communities while the virus surges. The way forward will be different across our communities. Rates of vaccination, case counts, ability to meet outside, quality of ventilation, ability to physically distance indoors, congregation size, and particular needs and risks of our staff, our leaders, and our members, all of these can vary, and all are important factors in planning how we gather. I'm encouraged, though. I'm so encouraged by the creativity I witness in our congregations and the way that we are all leaning into mission, remembering how much our families and elders need community. It's important to think outside the box and to experiment with ways of gathering, both virtually and in person, that are meaningful and that attend to safety. In this time of ingathering, this season of new beginnings, care, kindness, and patience for ourselves and others are needed in abundance. Remember to prioritize the values of inclusion and consent, centering those most at risk, and to follow the science and be flexible in making plans and changing them when needed. At its core, ingathering is a ritual that celebrates the value and the meaning of religious community, the ways that we are held by a wider circle of love and care. I invite you to take a moment to be present to your body, and the physical space in which you are present. Be open to the emotions that you carry in your spirit. And remember that you are not alone. We belong to each other. And even when we are apart, we are held by a greater love. We are held by a religious community and by people that comfort us and care for us and remind us of our connection to the larger interdependent web of which we are all a part. May we be grateful for the unseen but very real threads of compassion and strength, care and intention that surround us. There is great healing and sustaining power in our faith, and our work is to make these manifest in ourselves and in our communities, even if how we do this looks and continues to look differently than it did before. Our ministry is life-saving when it is responsive to our realities, helping all of us navigate these unprecedented and very precarious times. Thank you for being a part of this faith and for your commitment to your UU congregation. We will get through this together, caring for one another and being held by the larger embrace of abiding love. I send you my blessings to you and your loved ones and your families and to your communities. My love and care to each and every one of you. Blessed be.
For our opening hymn, I'm going to sing, and you hopefully are going to hum, Building Bridges, which I found out this week was developed by women who were protesting the arrival of nuclear weapons at a Royal Air Force base in England in the early 1980s. They continued peace camps there for 19 years. So that's where this song comes from. But it is so apt for so many, for all time, I think. So please join me. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, Sisters, we could make such sweet harmony, building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, brothers, we can make such sweet harmony. Thank you. One of the ways we support one another in community is through the sharing of joys, sorrows, and milestones. In these challenging times, staying compassionately connected to one another is crucial. Our church's website has a link which allows you to confidentially submit a joy, sorrow, or milestone to the minister. You can specify if you would like your submission shared with the caring team or the congregation, or if you prefer it remain confidential with the minister. There were neither joys nor sorrows submitted this week. But as we all know, in the news every week these days, it seems there are countless tugs at our hearts for all kinds of crises and dilemmas throughout the globe. Let us be lovingly aware of those who continue to feel the impacts and are mourning the losses of 9/11. Let us honor those who lost their lives and lift up the undocumented people who perished and whose names were not spoken at the time of the attacks on 2001. Let us hold in our hearts the refugees all around the world, leaving their homes due to war, famine, disease, flood, and fire. For all sorrows, concerns, and joys deep within our hearts, we light a candle with the intention to treat one another with patience and love, knowing that we all hold hopes and dreams, wounds and worries in our hearts.
I invite you to join me in a moment of meditation. I found this meditation when I was researching alternate forms of the prayer of St. Francis, and there's not a thing wrong with St. Francis's prayer. But this one spoke to me in ways that others do not, and it is a guided meditation written by Tony Brady. So I ask you to join me as we move into a moment of peace and reflection. Giver of life, spirit beyond all our knowing, let me bring the gift of peace into the world. May I be an emissary of love and kindness in every ocean of hostility or prejudice. Aware of my own failings, may I be patient, repeatedly patient with the failings of others. May I be forgiving toward those who injure me through fear, through thoughtlessness, or more. In a world of doubt and anxiety, let me offer the light of reason, courage, and even hope. Because in this wonderful world, we must open our eyes if we are to distinguish the light from the darkness. Sadness may be the lot of people in my world. So let me sit with the sad, the dispossessed, the unloved, the misunderstood, the bereaved. Give me strength to listen, to comfort, and to help turn their sadnesses into joy. Bringing kindness and compassion to others, may I receive the same in my turn, knowing that the measure I give out is the measure I will receive back, just as my being understood is the natural reward of my efforts at understanding others. My being loved is a gift I receive when I give myself to others in love, just as forgiveness is the greater reward for every forgiver. We are told that he who loses his life will save it, and may that be so. Still, let my life be spent in seeking no reward save that of knowing that I do the will of you, the giver of life. Amen.
This reading is from Christine Slocum. She's a Unitarian Universalist in Buffalo, New York, who works with homelessness and people who are dealing with food insecurity. And she wrote this in May of this year. So just keep that context in mind. Your breath is always with you. This is a common meditation prompt. Remember when we used to breathe all over each other? Pre-pandemic, we stood behind each other in the grocery line, chit-chatted before meetings, or sat right next to each other in church. There was a clear line of sight to each other's noses, and the sound of our voices were unobstructed by fabric. My unrestricted exhales didn't put me out of right relationship with those around me. The virus changed how we understand the consequences of breathing. I used to breathe without thinking. If I was breathing mindfully, it was in the context of meditation or yoga. Breath was life force or a tool of centering oneself. Now we know the way we take up space includes where our breath goes. But breath is also a vector of illness. With over 500,000 people deceased and many in my community, I could not ignore the potential power I had to spread illness. I didn't like how something so fundamental to my being could cause harm. I also couldn't deny it. Masking up became so normal, I felt naked in public without it. I learned to cross the street whenever I saw anyone on the sidewalk. I chose to forego unneeded interpersonal interactions. It's been a lonely year. My own understanding of personal space aligned with the collective revision to 6 feet. Even after receiving the vaccine and the requisite time elapsing to immunity, my instincts to avoid other people are still very sharp. I could still harm. I miss the innocence about how we existed in each other's presence. I miss the ease and lack of caution. What I understand to be true, the safety I perceived was because I did not have the complete perspective. Committing to right relationships means being willing to revise our practices when we learn that previously accepted habits might be harmful. It's true of the language we use and the ways we practice power. Now we know the way we steward our breath matters. I will leave the pandemic with a better understanding of how to protect people around me from illness. May I recognize this awareness as a gift and use it to express care for the people around me.
these last few weeks and months have been a time of unprecedented crises layered upon each other, a time of such uncertainty and instability. When I try to imagine what to expect next, I sometimes sing this song to myself lately, a song that reminds me not to have any expectations or try and set a specific plan for the future, but to move together in harmony, in rhythm with my community. To remember that the wisdom of our community is the greatest wisdom. To remember that we can move together, that we are defined by each other, and that together we can find a way forward. I invite you to sing along, "We shall be known by the company we keep." We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round attend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change and life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round attend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change and life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around attend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change and life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around attend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change and life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Good morning again. During quarantine and in the months leading up to our returning to in-person services, I've thought a lot about our church and about its future. And I know I'm not the only one that's been doing that, because I hear lots of other people doing it too. I had a really clear idea about what I wanted to talk about today. And then I read Dave Leonard's op-ed in Friday's New York Times. This article pushed me down a divergent path and helped me to clarify some of my thinking about today's service. So I want to share with you an edited by me version of the article. If you wish to read it in its entirety, I will be happy to share the link. Dave Leonard wrote, "A Missing Legacy." The great crises in the United States history have often inspired the country to great accomplishments. The Civil War led to the emancipation of Black Americans and a sprawling program of investment in railroads and colleges. World War II sparked the creation of the middle class, and the Cold War brought about the space program and interest in science and technology. The attacks of September 11th, which occurred on a sparkling late summer morning 20 years ago yesterday, had the potential to leave their own legacy of recovery. In sorrow and anger, Americans were more united in the weeks after the attacks than they had been in years. President George W. Bush's approval rating exceeded 85%. It isn't hard to imagine how Bush might have responded to September 11th with the kind of domestic mobilization of previous wars. He could have rallied the country to end its reliance on Middle Eastern oil, a reliance that both financed radical American enemies and kept the United States enmeshed in the region. While attacking al-Qaeda militarily, Bush also could have called for enormous investments in solar energy, wind energy, nuclear power, and natural gas. It could have been transformative for the economy, the climate, and Bush's historical standing. President Bush chose a different path, one that was ambitious in its own right. He hoped that toppling the Taliban in Afghanistan and Saddam Hussein in Iraq would inspire people around the world to rise up for democracy and defeat autocracy. And for a brief period, the Arab Spring starting in 2010, his vision almost seemed to be playing out. Today, though, we know it did not. 20 years after September 11th, the attacks seem likely to be remembered as a double tragedy. The attacks on that day killed at least 3,000 people, and the ensuing wars killed hundreds of thousands more. And here's the haunting question that lingers. Out of all that trauma, did we build a better future? In today's environment, COVID-19 is our crisis, our catalyst, and our opportunity. It is the known enemy and also elusive and unknown. We've all experienced mental and physical and emotional trauma because of the isolation, uncertainty, and fear we experienced during the past 18 months. Quarantine was and continues to be exhausting. We've spent months isolating from our families and each other. Some of us lost loved ones and mourned alone. We spent our energies focusing on individual safety, individual survival, maintaining distant family connections, and most of all, worrying. Worrying that we or a loved one might catch the virus and end up on a ventilator or in a hospital. Worrying about the latest news of political unrest, and there sure was a bunch of that, wasn't there? Worrying about our families and friends near and far. Celebrating holidays and birthdays alone. While we tried and often were grateful for FaceTime, Zoom, telephone calls, and the occasional old-fashioned letter or card, it just wasn't the same. We're tired of masks, tired of social distancing, about hearing about COVID and its variants. We all have post-traumatic stress. And sometimes post-traumatic stress leads us to behave in ways that we might not otherwise. Since the first folks became fully vaccinated, I've heard rumblings and pushbacks from the community at large and from our church community. Why should I have to wear a mask? I've been immunized. Because I'm immunized, the rules should be different for me. I've traveled and had no problems, so I don't see why I should have to curtail or change my plans. And here's the biggest one, and probably the most fallacious for me. We need to just get back to normal and move on. I do not believe we can ever go back to the way we were. As someone who has traveled and moved a lot, and come back to New Mexico 4 times after leaving when I was 18, I can tell you that the Las Cruces I left in 1968 is not the Las Cruces I live in today. It was not the Las Cruces I returned to in 2000, and it continues to change. We can't go back to the way we were. Too much is different, too much is lost, too many have died. It is normal to reminisce and perhaps romanticize that the time BC, before COVID, was wonderful. We describe the music and rituals that were meaningful to us. We remember dinners with family and friends and fun at our auction events. We want to laugh again, sing again, hug again, all the things that strengthened our connections with each other. In my mind, when we move past the frustration and comparisons between before COVID and now, which is interim COVID, I think, these questions arise. What have we learned about ourselves, about our place in the Las Cruces, the New Mexico and the West Texas, El Paso communities during the last 18 months? You may ask why I include El Paso. I know a lot of people that drive back and forth there to work every day. How can we help our neighbors, our children and young adults, and our frenemies move toward a healthier, safer future? Can something positive grow out of our trauma? I believe it can. We have choices now. We can try to go back to the remembered times, or we can covenant together to think outside the box and walk a new and different path. Perhaps the first option is easier. I know the second choice is more difficult. Without a crystal ball, we cannot predict the ultimate outcomes of either choice. I strongly encourage us to embrace a new vision for this congregation, our faith, and our future. We can gain the courage our history provides us, and we can anticipate the adventure of the future, mosquitoes and all. We can acknowledge that we will make mistakes, agree to work together to fix them, and travel together in the unknown. In order to take these critical steps, it is crucial that we remember who we are and why we come together. Our church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces, is a covenantal faith community, and our spiritual practice centers on our principles and the sources, all of which are found in the front of our gray hymnal. In addition, we have a mission to guide our interactions with ourselves and the community around us. It's been a while, and so I'm going to share it. The mission of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces is to gather to inspire spiritual growth, to care for each other and our community, seek truth, and work for justice in the world. I think this is important, so I'm going to ask you to repeat it. I will say a line, and I ask you to please repeat a line after me. The mission of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces is to gather to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our community, seek truth and work for justice in the world. Thank you. Thank you. Our mission tells us where we're going, and it talks about how we're going to get there. We make covenants together, and ideally, these covenants grow out of and in support of our mission. Covenant is the promises we make to each other. To covenant together is to make a mutual binding agreement that includes promises, stipulations, privileges, and responsibilities. Covenant is about we, not about I. When was the last time you talked about a covenant? When was the last time you covenanted with someone or some other group? Man, this is a pain. When was the last time you read our covenant of right relations? One of the joys and blessings of working with our youth is that we covenant together at the beginning of each semester or each year. Our covenant is a living agreement, and the details can change depending on the participants, the seasons, or the world around us. But here's the important piece, I think. Having a covenant places us in an area of safety so that we can discuss our differences, resolve interpersonal issues, learn new things, and build a religious community. A key component to our recent covenants is what they call the Platinum Rule. Who knows what the Platinum Rule is? Ah, good. That's right. Treat others the way they would like to be treated. And so that means we have to tell each other how we want to be treated. We can't be silent about things that are uncomfortable or hurtful. As of last Sunday, I want to share with you the covenant that we have begun in religious education. I expect that we'll add to it over the coming weeks together. Again, it's a living document. But last week, our youth said, we covenant to treat others as they would like to be treated, be safe and take care of each other, respect each other, and listen. So covenants don't have to be complicated. They can be something that is easy to remember. Our congregation is in covenant with the Unitarian Universalist Association and our fellow congregations in the region and in the country. And we have a right relations covenant for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces, which was developed in 2011. Our committees and small ministry groups often covenant together. Our choir and our youth all have a covenant. These covenants are the glue that hold us in community. And I want to share the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces' covenant with right relations with you. We, the members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces, in order to create a community of loving kindness which fosters individual and community growth and promotes the dignity and self-worth of all individuals, do affirm and covenant to interact with each other with openness, honesty, respect, patience, sensitivity, and compassion. Toward this end, we agree to listen with an open mind, seeking to understand and empathize with each other while embracing our diversity and our differences. Be clear in communications, reflecting before responding and requesting and providing clarification as needed. Remain engaged during discussions and place the well-being of the community above disagreement. Endeavor to understand the behaviors, needs, and limitations of ourselves and others. Acknowledge the right to express opinions freely, seeking to be constructive by making sure our communications are true and expressed in a kind and helpful manner. Give and receive forgiveness and respect the confidentiality of personal information shared with us. Inform ourselves regarding church processes and communications and accept the responsibilities of membership in this community. By committing ourselves to this covenant, we shall build an environment of trust that promotes free and responsible discussion of ideas while cultivating an atmosphere of joy and celebration in our church community. It sounds pretty complex, doesn't it? What does it take to live into a covenant? And now I'm going to talk about me. I can't talk about any of the rest of you, but I can talk about me. And what does it take for me to live into covenant? And it takes a lot of hard spiritual work. As my friend Chris Northcutt said, being a Unitarian Universalist is hard work, and it never goes away. The first thing I have to do, and the most difficult, is to decenter myself in any relationship. That means I'm not the most important person. Oops. Not everything has to be about me, and I don't have to have the answers to every question. Truly listening and hearing what others say is next. Not how is said, but what it is said. When I'm thinking about my response and not attending to the person speaking, and I do that, I'm not acting in covenant with that person. I am a woman of opinions, and covenant requires me to allow other people to express their opinions as well. And sometimes it's easy to focus on my own defensive reactions or the defensive reactions that something that has been said evokes in someone else, and to not hear the words that are actually said. I'm looking at the reaction and not hearing the words. When that happens, I have to remember to stop and ask myself and the other person, what are you feeling right now? Not do you think, or what are you thinking, but what are you feeling? For me, living into covenant is an ongoing process that requires attention, support, and commitment to love. Sometimes our covenants crack and sometimes they break. And the entire community can be weakened if there is no honest effort to repair the breach. In that event, both parties or all parties must work together to repair it. And that means facing the issue, being willing to share feelings and to listen as well as speak. One of the most powerful tools I've learned to use over the years is the phrase, when I feel. And I wish I could use that on my mother sometimes, but she wouldn't understand it. But I'm going to use that as an example. My mother does not like how I do my hair. She has not been happy with my hair since it started to grow on my head when I was an infant. There has always been something wrong with it. And the other day, well, it's true. The other day, she said to me, honey, I wish you'd just cut your hair. You'd be prettier. What I would like to have been able to say to my mother, and since she's 93, I cannot because she wouldn't understand it. But what I'd like to be able to say is, Mother, when you say that, I feel diminished. I feel unloved. Is that what you intended? Because I know that's not her intent, but that's how it sounds when I hear it. So focusing on the when I feel allows me to look at the actions and behaviors of someone else rather than on my feelings directly and only about the situation. Rather than pointing a finger in judgment, I sure wish you'd cut your hair. I'm able to focus on my part in the process. Sounds easy, right? It's one of the hardest things I have to do when I am hurt. When we work together in covenant with one another, we acknowledge our common connections and purposes. We set our lives around the practice of living out the promises we make to each other, to our wider community, and to our world. We can create an infrastructure that supports our community and our world. It is these promises that hold us together, that strengthen the power of we. And in closing, I'd like to share with you the promise of the 12-step program Overeaters Anonymous. It's used in other 12-step programs as well. And I think it to me speaks of what it means to be together in covenant. And the promise says, I put my hand in yours, and together we can do what we could never do alone. No longer is there a sense of hopelessness. No longer must we each depend upon our own unsteady willpower. We are all together now, reaching out our hands for power and strength greater than ours. And as we join hands, we find love and understanding beyond our wildest dreams. Thank you for listening.
At last, we are worshiping together in our refurbished sanctuary and streaming worship services to include as many people as possible. As a community of faith and generosity, we weathered more than a year and a half during which no services were held in person. Many of the church's expenses continued during the past 18 months, and some will increase as we reopen and expand services and programs. It is vitally important for the ongoing work and health of the church that each of us fulfill our financial pledge. All through the pandemic, the church continued our financial support of organizations identified by the Social Justice Committee as recipients for Change program. The recipient for this quarter is El Calvario Immigration Resource Center, which is located at the El Calvario United Methodist Church. The center provides hospitality for newly arrived immigrants, as well as immigrant families living in our county, some of whom were not eligible for governmental assistance from the pandemic assistance from the government. El Calvario helps immigrants access local resources for housing, healthcare, legal assistance, and emergency food. In support of recently arrived Afghan refugees, the mission has been expanded to serve as a collection site for donated items, which are passed on to the Red Cross to be delivered to refugees who will be staying at military installations in the region, such as Fort Bliss, Doñana County Range, and Holloman Air Force Base near Alamogordo. You can make your pledge or donate to Change for Change by putting checks and change in the basket, which will soon come around, by sending your checks to the church, or by using the Give link at our website.
We've got the power, alleluia. 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 We've got the power, hallelujah. 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 We've got the power, hallelujah.
We are pleased that you're attending this worship service. And if you're looking for a spiritual home or sympathetic with Unitarian Universalist values and principles, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces may be the place for you. We believe that when you become a member, you are entering into a warm and deep relationship with the church and all of our members and friends. You are becoming a part of something much bigger than any of us. You are becoming a part of a movement to change our community and our world. There are several routes to membership. When the minister is in the pulpit, you can speak with him after an in-person service. You can call the church and leave a message about your interest, and a person from the membership committee will return your call. Or you can sign virtual membership book through the link in the electronic order of service, the chat link. We're going to do, instead of a closing hymn, since you all cannot sing, we've chosen to change a hymn to a responsive reading this morning. The hymn is "We Begin Again in Love," the words of which are by Robert Eller Isaacs. And Sally will be the narrator, and you and I will be saying the refrain, which is, "We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love." I'll cue you.
For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other.
We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible,
We
forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Closing words today are also from the Reverend Carol Thomas Sissel. And she wrote, "We are the promises we make and the vows we break. In this faith, Unitarian Universalism, covenant binds us together and strengthens our relationships. Covenants create a pathway toward inclusiveness, and in times of both joy and sorrow, remind us that we are tough, resilient, and thoughtful. We become better people, and often much more intelligent when we make the intentional choice to create connections and stand in collaborative community with one another."
I'm going to read a different words for extinguishing the flame today. These words are from Amy Zucker Morgenstern. And please remain seated for the postlude. It's a video from Elizabeth Alexander. So we are one, Amy Zucker Morgenstern. Never has it been more true than now. We extinguish this flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparking through space and to one another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one, and from every window, our light shines.
Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. Oh, bring your pain and sorrow and joy. There's a place for them upon the altar of life. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. This is a place of grace, a place of losing and finding our way upon the winding road. Meeting and parting, stumbling and starting over. Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. Oh, bring your pain and sorrow and joy. There's a place for them upon the altar of life. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome here. And do not leave your cares at the door. This is a place of grace, a place of losing and finding our way upon the winding road. meeting and parting, stumbling and starting over.
Every story is sacred here, even yours.
Even yours. So come on in and do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave them there when you come into this place. Be open to forgiveness and transformation. Come on in, you are welcome in.
Come in
And do not leave your cares at the door. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Just a reminder,